banking landscape, what to expect in 2024. The past decade has witnessed a digital revolution in the banking sector with new technologies and innovations coming in. The way we manage our finances has been completely transformed. In this landscape, where do Pakistani banks stand? Join us today in a pioneer in this field who has headed multiple initiatives in digital sector. Mr. Aminur Rahman is currently the Chief Digital Officer for Faisal Bank. He has over 20 plus years of experience in the digital payment and financial service sector, serving multiple industries. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive into the discussion, I'd like you to share a bit about your journey. Please.
Thank you, Nomina. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think it's a great initiative that you've taken to, you know, put the people across in terms of the audience and the guests in terms of what's happening across multiple sectors, especially in this interesting sector, the happening sector, which is banking, especially the digital side
Mhm,
of things. So, just a little bit about myself. I've been a career banker throughout, like you mentioned, it's been over 20 years. I've primarily been associated with consumer banking, which is the more happening part of banking. So, I've been associated with mortgages, with car financing, with the plastic money, which has been a greater part of my career. That the advent of debit cards and credit cards and the entire evolution I've seen that in Pakistan. There used to be a great deal of resistance in terms of the plastic money or the acceptance of cards. So that's the journey that I've seen through personally. And then there was a little bit of stint that I did outside of banking, where I was part of K Electric, which was part of the change management team when K Electric was privatized. So I was heading the
mhm.
digital media and public relations.
Wow.
And once back into the banking or the financial side, I used to be with Visa as the account director for Pakistan. And that's where my digital
Mhm,
journey started, post which I used to be with UPL as heading their digital payments. And now, like you mentioned,
mhm.
the digital office of a Faisal Bank.
Awesome, great. That's an awesome and interesting journey, and I'm sure that my the audience, if who are there, they will learn something out of these questions, which I'm going to put forward in front of you. My first question would be is like, can you highlight some major initiatives banks have taken in the past 10 years to digitalize their processes? What are we looking forward to in 2024?
So, Namita, that's a very interesting question because if you look at the entire journey, so it's not just about what happened in 2023 or what happened in 2022. It's about
Mm-hmm.
how the entire journey has evolved over the past 5, 7 years. The customers now
Yes.
demand more, the customers now expect more. So it's not just
Mm-hmm.
about banking. Even if we look outside of banking, so whether you call it digital or automation, etc., the digital experience now permeates across all sectors. I'll come back to the main question, but look at even food ordering, whether it's online ordering, ride hailing, etc. So it's
Yes.
all about online. So the same sort of
Mm-hmm.
convenience is what the customers are looking for with their banking experience as well. There are very few
Okay.
people who now want to walk into a branch unless you really have to for whatever services or otherwise particular services. But otherwise, you want banking on your fingertips. So over the past
Mm-hmm.
number of years, the biggest trend in banking has been digital banking, the mobile apps. So mobile apps has
Mm-hmm.
been now, you'd be surprised that bulk of the transactions, for example, about on an average for any bank, about 70 to 80% of the transactions now happen outside the counter. So they are happening
Wow.
on the ATMs, they're happening on the mobile apps, they're happening on the cards. So this is what the revolution has been. So
Mm, awesome.
so
Great.
beyond this, in our daily lives, you and I, as normal customers, we all experience because the card transactions. So, jahan pe, on one side, we as consumers have got the card in our hand. On the other side, there's a machine as well, the terminal. So wherever you go now,
Yes.
you find terminals. So that
Yeah.
ecosystem has evolved over the past number of years, and this is just the start of it. And
Mm-hmm.
since both of us have been part of the banking sector pretty close, or in terms of the experiences, look at the call center
Yes.
evolution. So call center is also
Mm-hmm.
another phenomenal, example of that one-touch banking. The call center only used to be maybe basic banking, maybe for balances, etc. But now it's much more beyond that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a great deal that has been covered over the past number of years, and I think the future is pretty exciting in terms of how this thing is going forward. The telcos have actually come in and actually created that financial inclusion. And the banks are also competing in the same space. So at the end of the day, the winner is the customer and the consumer.
Mm, mm. That's true, and I think so, especially with the new gen and even our gen as well. So we are hardly going to the banks nowadays, and it's all about digital and internet banking, and all your bank is on your internet. But I think so, there's still a lot need to be done in coming years, because with the way technology is evolving, I think so. Our banks, when it comes to POS, uh, those things are also going obsolete now. So we'll talk about it later. So tell us, how has the recent wave of digitalization in banking impacted different groups of consumers like SMEs and freelancers?
Another very good and interesting question, because this is what we as bankers are now contemplating. There is not just the retail consumer, the average consumer who wants better services. It's the businesses as well.
Mm-hmm.
So in
Yes.
fact, the businesses need that digital footprint for them to grow their businesses. So I'll give you the example
Mm-hmm.
of SME as well, SME banking. So no longer SME banking or agriculture is not just about giving loans or making sure that the check is being passed from one hand to or the other. So even in the
Mm-hmm.
SME space, you'd be interested to hear, Nomina, that we are partnering up with a number of fintechs at Faisal Bank. So what we're
Wow.
doing is that we
Okay.
understand that growth, and even in the future, when we come onto the conversation of how 2024 will unfold and going forward. So growth
Yes.
in banking will come in from collaboration. There's only a certain
Mm-hmm.
degree that you can do something on your own. If you want to go further, you go with number of other people and those who are experts in the particular fields. So in SME, like you mentioned, so we're partnering with a number of fintechs for supply chain financing. So there are a
Mm-hmm.
number of people out there in the market who are actually doing a great deal of work in terms of creating that ecosystem. So what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing over here is that this is one part of it. And there's agri-tech, as you might have heard. There's a lot
Yes.
of
Yes.
fintech activity in the agri-tech. So agri-tech means that there are people on the ground out there who are actually helping or assisting the banks in making that decision. So in
Mm-hmm.
agriculture, one of the biggest impediments is that the banks, or let's say any lender, feels that okay, how can I lend to the farmer, because I don't know maybe 1 year from now whether his crop is going to be yielding the amount that he says or not, because it's subject
Yes,
to
that's
weather.
one of the biggest thing for every banker.
So what the agri-techs do is they estimate that crop yield based on scientific methods. There's laser leveling. What they do is that they
Okay.
conduct they conduct an AI based evaluation that based on the productivity of the farmland, etc. What will be your yield per acre in the coming months, or if there's
Mm-hmm.
any weather patterns, etc. So bringing it into a nutshell, the whole perspective is data. So the more you have
Yes.
information available, even as a consumer and even as a banker for that matter, it's make decisions easier for you to take.
Hmm. 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 So, and freelancers, how do you guys perceive freelancers? Because I think so, your bank is doing something with them, along with some collaboration with them on the certain payments and all the stuff.
One of the biggest, I'd say, opportunities for Pakistan, as we all know, everybody is now talking about that gig economy, the freelancers,
Yes.
because
Yes.
that's one area that possibly and potentially can substantiate not just our earnings as well, but also in terms
Mm-hmm.
of foreign exchange inflows, but also employ
Mm-hmm.
a great deal of the youth, because right now you're mentioning the Gen Zs and the Gen Alpha, which will probably
Yes.
Gen Alpha will come into the job market in the next 5, 7, 10 years. So
Mm-hmm.
what is it that generation wants? That's the online or the digital screen generation. So they're not
Yes.
interested in the traditional jobs. So they feel more
Mm-hmm.
empowered, where they're able to work at their own pace and they're able to deliver, or choose the project of their liking. So the freelance economy provides them that liberty. And right now,
Mm-hmm.
look at Pakistan. So Pakistan is in the top 5 globally in terms of the freelance, in the freelance audience. And
Mm-hmm.
an
That's
interesting
true.
stat, Novina, that 9% of the total online workforce is coming from Pakistan.
Yeah.
So it's a huge potential out there. So coming about the fact, what are banks doing and what we at Federal Bank are doing in particular, speaking about
Yes.
banking in general. So there's been a great
Yeah.
degree of push from the regulator as well on the freelancers and empowering
Mm-hmm.
them. on how to get them into the banking circle. Because for example, if I'm a freelancer, I might be
Mm-hmm.
registered on one of the online platforms, but I'm not really well aware of
Mm-hmm.
how am I going to get this remittance into Pakistan. So
True.
there's a huge program that State Bank has been driving and pushing all the banks put together, that how to connect or ensure that the freelancers have got digital accounts as well. So they've
Yes.
reduced the burden of the KYCs and the hassles of the freelancers to open up accounts. And there's a great deal
Mhm.
of incentive as well. Now there's also an incentive that a certain percentage of your foreign exchange can be retained in Pakistan. In foreign exchange, you don't have to convert that in PKR, because there's a lot of issues out there that the freelance workers, they don't bring the money into Pakistan. Their fear
Oh,
factor is
yes.
that if you bring those dollars into Pakistan, then the devaluation, etc., that's going to impact my savings,
I
etc.
mean,
So
this
now
is not only for freelancers. This is for this is for many IT companies and as well as many other companies who are in multiple businesses who are working abroad. So they have just all opened their offices there to keep the money mainly, actually. Yeah.
you're right. So especially for the freelancers, so there's a lot of things which are in play at this point in time. The
Mm.
regulator, let's say those in power, they understand that the rule makers, that they have to do something different to address that economy or address that segment of the market. So freelance in the future, in the next 5 years, has got a huge potential in terms of billions of dollars in terms of incoming remittance inflows of Pakistan. So that's been a great degree of you can pick up any paper or any online blog. There's a lot of activity to talk about how to motivate or mobilize that freelance economy out there in Pakistan. So banks are playing their role. At Festival Bank, we've partnered up with Payoneer. Payoneer is one of the largest freelance community. So what we're doing is, if a freelancer is connected with Payoneer, so automatically the funds can be pulled into your account with the bank. So what that does is that you automatically get a debit card, etc. You don't have to run around. So there are a lot of banks, a lot of entities which
Definitely.
are working with the freelancers. In fact, we are also
Oh,
working very closely with PITB, the Pakistan IT
okay.
board. So for
Gigi.
over the past 4 or 5 months, we have run a number of training camps with PITB
Okay.
to train
Mm-hmm.
those freelance youngsters on how they can actually be financially included, in the sense that how do they operate their accounts, how do they open an account, what do they do with their account. So there's a lot that is
Wow.
happening, but I think there's a lot more that should be and can be done.
Oh, yes, definitely. And I think so. If we can have try at least them bringing 50% of the remittance in Pakistan as well, that's going to be a big achievement for the whole economy as well. So again, all of this gets again impacted by the government decision, the political instability, our economic hindrance, and all this stuff. So tell us, what role has the government played in? We have spoken a little bit about the government role in playing in terms of freelancing and all stuff, but again, there's a lot of things needs to be done. So, what role has the government played in promoting or hindering digitalization efforts in the banking sector?
It's interesting because I'm sure the audience would like to know, and even when we connect in the circle that we belong to, which is the
Yes.
corporate sector, this is one of the most talked about or discussed elements. But to be honest, I feel that there has to be a public-private partnership. The entire onus cannot be put onto the government alone, because the private sector has been and is also playing a role. Because the conversation that we were having earlier, so there's a great deal of activities which is happening with institutes like Pasha as well, institutions, the entities like Pasha.
Yes,
So
definitely.
So it is a mixture of a blend of that hand holding between public private partnership, because there are a lot of activities. For example, there's the national incubation centers across number of regions in Pakistan. Then there's the Pakistan Software Export Board. PITB is doing a great deal of activity in the center and large parts of Pakistan. But at the same time, that mobilization in terms of providing them the opportunity. I'll give you an example, because we at our bank are pretty big in terms of inclusivity as well. So we have a number of programs, an outreach program for young women as well, and
Okay.
housewives, because there's a great deal of workforce out there in Pakistan. Women are 50% of the work population in Pakistan, and a
Yes.
lot of them, of lot of those who are even educated, they have the possibly the willingness to work, or they have got the ability to work in terms of the education qualification, but they don't have the opportunity. It could be a number of
Mm-hmm.
reasons. So freelance
Mm-hmm.
work, or this IT software designing, etc., any opportunity to give or for them to become part of the online workforce, that empowerment, I think that responsibility rests with both the government and the private sector. So
Mm-hmm.
like Faisal Bank, I'm sure there are a lot of other entities as well that I know of that are playing a large role in that diversity and inclusivity agenda. So just imagine that
Okay.
50% of the work population in Pakistan is sitting idle at home. If all of us
Mm-hmm.
put together that we empower them to provide them the ability to connect, so it could be a
Mm-hmm.
game changer for Pakistan. So yes, the government definitely needs to create that enabling or empowerment framework or rules like we mentioned earlier, that for example, you have to figure out what is the pain point. The freelancer
Yeah.
that we were speaking about, their pain
Yes.
point is that if I'm earning in dollars, why should there be a risk in terms of my FX conversion? So there are rules or regulations that are being developed around that. Then there's the
Yes.
point of course, the inclusivity part of it, that how do I get around that? So this is where entities like
Mm-hmm.
Basha, the banks, and a number of other private sector organizations, they can actually come together. And I think I must commend the job that Nick has been doing, the National Incubation Centers, in hackathons,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of
Yes.
creating or providing the youth that opportunity to put the idea across to the sponsors. So there's so much
Mm-hmm.
brilliance out there in Pakistan, Amina, that there's no
I
dearth
know.
of,
It's
there's no
amazing.
dearth of talent.
Yes.
You
Yes.
you
Yes.
you connected with the kids on the grassroots level. So there's no dearth of talent. There's no shortage of
There's
ideas.
so much learning from them actually.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So in fact, we
Yeah.
got a program for the management trainees, and our whole perspective is to have that fresh blood coming in with the new ideas, so that old bankers
Mm.
like myself, then we get challenged in terms of the thought process.
I know we need to start getting into this. I mean, I started taking those small courses or short courses in terms of new technology or what is new happening and all those sort of things. It's like constantly learning now. Anyway, so let's get to move to our second question. Thank you so much. It was a quite an experience, but I still think that there's a lot of gap when government comes into it. And uh, yes, public-private sector needs to work together, and I think so. Things are getting in line on those elements. But they are, and government is also trying their level best as well. But again, there's a lot of playing field which the government also needs to work on in terms of internet, in terms of other many things in order to further grow this whole grow our economy. Okay, so how do so my next question is, how do traditional banks view the rise of digital banks, as collaborators, competitors, or both?
The way the entire ecosystem is heading, so it'll be foolish for anybody to say that they're competitors, because if you look at the financial inclusivity in Pakistan, it's hardly about 20-30%.
Yes.
So the financially excluded are still over 50% in Pakistan, which includes the largely the women workforce, and even otherwise if you talk about the lower segments of the SEC. So the whole
Mm-hmm.
perspective is that digital banks definitely they will up the game in terms of the service orientation. So like I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier, over the past number of years, the banks have realized that it's not just about having a product on the menu, it's also about the service delivery. Today, when you choose a bank,
Mm-hmm.
no longer do you choose a bank just because it's closer to your office or home. Now you choose a bank
Yes.
based on the kind of service delivery or the service expectation that they're able to match or meet up. So the digital banks,
Yes.
the segment which you mentioned earlier, the Gen Z, the Gen Alpha, the upcoming banking customers, so to speak. So they don't prefer, like I mentioned, to walk into a branch because they don't have the time, neither do they have the interest. So the digital banks will be quite possibly, of course, not only attracting those customers, that segment of the audience or the market, which traditionally feels alienated from the traditional banks. And not only that, because I feel that customers, let's say for the sake of example, customers like you and me, if there's a service orientation, or if there's a service delivery where we know that there's an A-rated service by an entity X, so it doesn't make a difference whether it's a traditional bank, a neo bank, or a digital bank. So our choice will be dependent upon how well are they able to service or match up to your expectations. So I think digital banking or the DRB, especially the five licenses that have actually come across over the
Yes.
next coming years, especially 24, 25, will be a very interesting year because I think they will up the
Mhm.
game in terms of creating the competitiveness in the market. And I think it'd be fair to mention over here, Nomina, at this point in time, that it's not just the DRBs. For example, if you look at the EMIs over the past year or two, I mean, I'd like to
Mhm.
name, for example, everybody knows you can count them on the finger of your hands. It's Sada Pays and the Nea Pays of the world. They've done pretty decent
Yes.
in terms.
Yes. Yes.
Even right now, the college-going kids, for example, the Gen Alpha, the Gen Zs right now, their preference for that matter. Why are
Mhm.
they preferring the EMIs? It's because of the
Mhm.
experience, their wow factor, or they're able to relate to them better. The services might be the
Mhm.
same. And for that
Mhm.
matter, the easy pesos of the world, the Jazz Cash, etc., the telcos have done a phenomenal job in terms of the digital wallets. The number of digital wallets in Pakistan are, the figures that are thrown are 100 million. They could be unique number could be less, but 100 million wallets in Pakistan, while the banking or bank accounts over the last 70 years have only been about 60, 70 million bank accounts. So there's a great deal of activity happening. When the telcos came in with the digital wallets, it did not mean that the banks shrunk in the business. When the EMIs came in, it did not mean that the
Mhm.
telcos or the digital wallets disappeared. The entire ecosystem is growing. So I think there's a huge and immense opportunity for everybody to be a part of this entire wave.
Again, you see, banks have their own way, and it takes time for a bank to evolve in terms of putting in any service in place or a new service, digital service on place. Because they have like a huge infrastructure. When it comes to digital banks, they have like for them it's more quicker because it's all new, it's all in place. It's things are there. So again, I would not. I mean, for me, it looks more like a competitor because you see, the banks will be competing because eventually, if the Gen Z goes into these new digital banks or SadaPay and NeaPay,
Mhm.
so don't you think so? The banks who we are banking right now, they might have an issue getting on board Gen Zs.
It's a mixed bag, Naveen, in my opinion, because if I look at the horizon for the next 3 to 5 years, I will not say I won't talk about the next 10 years, but if you look at the next 3 to 5 years, so in a
Mm,
country like Pakistan compared to let's say the EU market or the US market, so there's a great distinction. And
mm,
what is that distinction right now? If you look at
mm,
UK or the other European markets, there's a wave of change happening over there that the banks are shutting down the branches and they're moving digital
mm,
or virtual.
mm,
But in Pakistan,
mm,
if you look at it, the number of branches every year are increasing. But that's because if you look
yes.
at the number of people per branch, so we are highly underserved. So we got about all banks put together, 50 or 50, 53 banks put together, but only got about 60,000 branches for about
Mm,
50 million population. And the concentration of
mm,
those 60,000 branches is only in the primary cities, or let's say the close to primary cities. So there's a huge divide in terms of that reach. So if you ask about the strategy, let's say even for the traditional banks, they understand that they have to be digital. So the footprint or the digital right or the strategy right now is called the brick and click strategy or the phygital strategy. There's a digital strategy for the physical world because you cannot minus the fact in Pakistan that you need a physical presence. So even if you
yes.
talk about, let's say, the success model of the telcos with the with digital wallets, so you have to understand if you look at it with the 100 million wallets, the success story alone was not the wallets. There was a great degree of those agent model. So there's a huge network of thousands of 100 and 200,000 agents across Pakistan. So that that from point to point transmission of money or that comfort level of confidence was only there because that let's say a guard or a driver working in Karachi sending money to his family all the way in Kohad, etc. Bannu. So there's an agent sitting over there. So the wallets are there, the digital presence, the digital banking is there, but a physical presence, whether it's a kiosk, you might call him an agent, you might call it agency banking or a full-fledged branch for that matter, for a traditional bank. But there has to be some sort of a human touch at some degree in Pakistan. That's the need of the hour for the next 3 to 5 years at least. So there has to be a mix. The Gen Z, Gen Alpha, you're absolutely right, but they do not make about 50 or 60% of the population. So right now, the strategy, if I ask you to put that strategy on paper right now, even for the next
Mhm.
2 years, the demand or that tipping point will not happen in the next 2 years. Yes, the new customers are
mm,
coming in, the Gen Zs are coming in, the Gen Alpha is coming in. That is why you've got the digital products for them as well. But at the same time, those who are underserved or financially excluded, they still need that confidence level. They still need to sit across on the seat with a relationship manager in a branch for them to be, able to understand that why should they open up an account in a bank. So I think it's a
mm.
mix. So it's a good strategy that, of course, the new upcoming generation definitely, like I said, they don't want a physical presence or a brick and mortar since they're very handy tech savvy. But if you look at the population at large in Pakistan, they still need some sort of financial coaching, which can only be offered by banks or maybe virtual banks.
Yes, I mean, before I get to my another question, this is a question since we are in this lending part and we are this area. So I would like, I got a very interesting question from Mr. Mir Najib. He said that while lending is not picking up now that digital onboarding infrastructure is available, consumer lending down is down by 7%, SME down by 6% as compared to last year, September 2022 versus September 2023. So, can you give an insight on this? I mean, that would be nice. Thank you.
Good question, Amina. So it's like a chicken and egg situation that if you're it's on the fingertips right now for you and me and for everybody out there that why lending is not that rampant or growing in double digits in Pakistan. Because if you look at the
Mhm,
basic issue at the bottom of the pyramid, it's about, let's say, the tax base. It's about the person who's actually able to qualify for that lending. So if you have got
mhm,
money in your pocket right now to lend to somebody, who will you lend it to? Somebody who's got a track record or somebody who comes to you who's got no track record. So in any developed economy or developing economy, the biggest difference compared to Pakistan is that the tax paying base, right? So if you've got a history as a taxpayer, if you are part of the system, it becomes easier for the lender to lend money to you. So if you are, let's say, a small retailer who is not even paying taxes, but he claims that he's got a couple of million rupees of turnover. So it's either you taking it on face value, or you take some sort of a proxy. So that's one of the
mhm,
issues. Now coming to the recent issue, let's say for 2022, 23 rather, 2023
mhm,
more so,
mhm,
is the hike in the lending rates. For example, if the base rate right now is about 21%, so if the bank
uh-huh,
is, if you as a lender, of course, if your cost is 21%, so if you
oh,
are packaging, let's say, an auto finance at 25%, that's an example. So of course there will be a
mhm,
certain degree of dip in the acceptability of the audience out there, right? How many people will be able to afford it, firstly, and secondly, how many people would you be willing to lend out to? So same thing as with the SMEs as well. You mentioned that SME lending or uptake for SME finances dipped by 7%. So you can imagine if a SME, if a small medium enterprise is borrowing at, let's say, 20% or 25%, then what sort of margins do they need to have to be able to sustain that, right? So right
and
now
this
it's the
20-25% is plus KIBOR before the KIBOR, like,
this is the gross rate because KIBOR is about, if you put it together, the base rate is 20-21%. So there's a lending rate
okay,
between 20 and 25%. So if
okay,
I ask you as a borrower, if you are running a small business, if I'm lending it to you as a bank at 25%, you have to have
that's a
maybe,
lot.
a huge margin. So what sort of margins do you need to be operating on for you to be able to pay me back at 25%? So the
True.
past 1 year has been a bit anomalous in terms of the inflation, the lending rates, etc. But as things ease out, so I think there's definite potential because over the past 10 years, Nomina, because if the audience is also listening, so
Mm,
we
yes.
have witnessed it firsthand that there's been a phenomenal increase in, let's say, auto loans, car financing. So that's
Mm,
been one industry over the past 10 years, 15 years that has done tremendously well. And that has been backed by
mm,
the lending business by the banks. So it's
mm,
only been the past 1 year that we've seen some sort of a stalemate or cold phase right now. But over the past 10
mm.
years, the growth has been phenomenal. So I'm sure that, once things ease out in terms of the inflation and, the things settle down in terms of the rate, that growth trajectory will once again be there.
I hope so, and we'll pray for that soon. Let's see how it works. So tell us, it's like since we know that our financial inclusion rate is very less, which is like around 21 to 30%. So what steps banks are further taking to increase financial inclusion, especially in rural areas?
Very interesting question, Norman. I think You really picked on the most important relevant questions, and the good part of it is
Thank you.
that when we're talking about the regulator as well, especially State Bank of Pakistan. So if you look at it over the past number of years, they have taken some steps and initiatives which are positive in terms of increasing that inclusivity at the grassroots level. I'll give you a few examples. For example, has heard of RAST. So RAST is
Mm-hmm.
a person-to-person payment for if I need to transfer funds to you. Traditionally, what used to
Mm-hmm.
happen was if I'm transferring funds to you through my mobile app or any digital wallet, etc., then there was a certain
Mm-hmm.
charge that I would be charged if
Mm-hmm.
I'm sending money to you. So what the regulator, what State Bank has done, that with the introduction of RAST, which is the faster payment rails,
Mm-hmm.
unified payment interface, and there are number of buzzwords, from the global economy. Some economies call it the UPI and the unified payment interface. So what RAST
Mm-hmm.
typically does is that it makes the P2P transfer, person to person transfer of funds, free of cost. So the basic
Mm-hmm.
element is that a lot of people, Nomina, they did not used to do the IBFT, the interbank fund transfer through online because of the charges.
Yes.
They used to still go
Yes.
to the ATM or take cash or give a check because there's no cost in check, right? At least upfront. Feature that might be, the cost of.
And never realizing the time frame and never realizing the petrol they are going to spend on going to the bank.
We all know many such people. So, so
Pardon?
yeah, the biggest impediment used to be the cost factor, right? Even if it used to be 100
Yes.
rupees on that transfer of funds, so now RAS has made that free. So
Yeah.
the whole purpose of doing that is removing the friction. So understanding the pain points, that what is it that is creating that impediment in making that viral. So I'd call that digital payment. You rather call it the change of hands. So make it more convenient, faster, and cheaper. So
Mm.
RAS is one part of it. Then you were talking about how to increase that inclusivity at the grassroots levels. So if you look
Mm.
at another interesting concept which has evolved over the past 1 or 2 years is the Asan account. So why did your
Yes.
driver, let's say the house staff working for you at home, why did they not go to a bank? Because at one side we're talking about the banks, they need customers, and we need to connect with the underserved. But at the same time, banks traditionally never used to open accounts for drivers and maids and chowkidars working with our houses. I'm giving a very generic example because that's very common to all of us. Because if they went
Yes.
into a branch, they never had a salary slip. So now the KYC requirements, कि जी salary slips, you need an account statement, you need a reference check, etc. So now what Asan account does is there's a zero KYC requirement. Just like opening up a
Mm.
wallet with any telco, you can open it up through your smartphone or even the simple USSD phone. Even now with Asan account, what it does is that it brings banks at par with those digital telco wallets and even with the digital banks for that matter. Because that
Okay.
Asan account you can open up at person and even operating at the grassroots level, the kind of examples that I gave right now, those individuals who are earning or getting salary on cash, that Asan account is a zero KYC account. In the sense that as long
Mm.
as you're able to give you a CNIC, you can open an Asan account. So with that Asana
Mm.
account in place, that gives banks an equal footage, an equal opportunity in terms of reaching out to that audience. Now, when we
Mm.
come back to the earlier part of the conversation, that person who, let's say, who's in Bihari, who's
Mm.
in a Bannu or any other small district, if you tell him कि जी Asana account का link ये है, you got to click it and open an account, he will never be able to do that because he doesn't have the confidence firstly, and there's of course a reluctance. So you still need that physical presence as well, whether it's through an
Mm.
agent, whether it's through a branch. So you need that human touch in that certain territory of Pakistan, and
Oh, yes.
for that category of customers, now you have got a product. So banks, I think, can play a huge role firstly in terms of creating that awareness, because banks, of course, have got a larger footprint and they've got a history which is much longer than the rest of the new
Mm.
players put together. So number one is that
Okay.
awareness, financial
Mm-hmm.
education, and then the
Mm.
ability to deliver that product. So I think all these things put together, they definitely need to be packaged correctly to be able to make a difference.
Great, awesome. I think so. That's a good insight. But I was also thinking is that with the RAS, a lot of banks were not happy too much about it as well, since the all the payments were going through RAS, so they were they were charging some amount to the to the people, and that sort of like kind of a financial gap was there. Anyway, we'll not go into that area. How has the emergence of alternate digital payment channels like Easy Pesa and Jazz Cash affected banks? I mean, we spoke a little bit about it, which you found it very nice, but has it affected banks in some way in terms of transactions or ROIs or numbers or something like that?
Not really, Nomina, because if you look at the overall deposits with the bank over the past 5 years, they've grown phenomenally. And what
Okay.
the telco wallets or the digital wallets that we've been speaking about over the past this recent few minutes, that they
Mm-hmm.
are picking up on that niche which the banks weren't serving. So, for example, like I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier, that if there's a individual who's working, let's say, as a security guard over here in Karachi, but he wants to send money to his family for his day-to-day, for their day-to-day affairs, so he could just transfer it over
Mm-hmm.
that agent. From they'll be able to
Yes.
receive it on the agent over there. So banks were not or will not be able to compete in that space because you've only got 60,000 branches for a 250 million population that we spoke about earlier. So there's a physical
Yes.
presence nonetheless. That agent is also a physical presence. So that
Mm.
so the people or the person on the other side, they are not receiving money over their digital wallet. They're receiving money in cash through an agent, and they're able to dispense of their daily affairs for making ends meet or daily groceries through that cash that they're receiving over there. So the telcos, what they've done is that, of course, like I mentioned earlier, that they've got about 100 million wallets, but at the same time, despite the fact that over the last number of years, they've done a phenomenal job in terms of attracting number of wallets, but the deposits still lie with the banks. And there's a logical answer for that as well. The large depositors, the corporate entities, or even the large individuals, if you got a large sum of money, you still want an entity, an enterprise whom you can trust in terms of their presence, in terms of the confidence, right? So the banks still command a greater degree of confidence or the trust
Mm-hmm.
factor. Banks are associated with trust. At the same time, at the grassroots level, it's a fantastic, phenomenal job that the telcos have done. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, collaboration is the way forward. There are a lot of collaborations with these telcos as well. That a lot of banks, what they're doing is that they're using or piggybacking on the agents. They're creating this
Mm-hmm.
tie-up with these telcos, and the locations where the banks do not have branches, they're tying up or
Mm-hmm.
collaborating with these telcos in order to use their agent channel for them to service their customers. So it's a healthy competition, and you have to realize that, for example, even on the flip side, I see you smiling, but on the flip side as well, Nomina, I'll give you an example that the telcos, for example, what they have is that they're giving out, let's say, example, debit card with each wallet, right? So where does that debit card
Yes.
customer go to withdraw money? They don't, the Easy Paisa, Jazz
Mm-hmm.
Cash of the world, they don't have a network, 20,000 strong network like the banks do. So their customers are being served by the assets of the network being already invested by the banks. So that
Right.
hand in glove,
Okay.
you have to understand that and each pocket there are strengths which you need to leverage as partnerships. This is just one example. There are a number of
Mm.
other examples. So you need to leverage the strengths of each other so that the ecosystem expands as a whole.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I again. So I have another question from someone since we are on the digital banking side and on this side. The question is basically from Mr. Aftab Khan. And he is saying is that I'm just trying to, yeah, yeah, yeah. So he's saying, how do you see digital banks taking deposits? As I understand that they are not keen on brick and mortar. Our market is very conservative, and there are quite many who still want to see the bank branch where the money is deposited. How digital banks will address this? From
Interesting
Aftab Khan.
question. Gee, Aftab sahab pointed out a very interesting question because this is exactly what we were talking about. So while there's a certain segment out there, a growing segment, who does not want to walk into a branch, but then there's a huge base out there who still wants that trust and confidence in a physical presence, in a brick and mortar presence. Because when you are entrusting your money with somebody, you want to see that person. That's a traditional concept which has been going around for decades. So that trust factor is the strength of the banks. At least I'm talking about the territory that we are operating in. So the X number of
Mhm.
years that I mentioned earlier, if you look at 3 years or 5 years down the road, so the strategy for the next 3 years or 5 years will be a phygital strategy. There has to be a
Mm.
physical presence as well as a digital strategy. You cannot say
Yes.
I'll ignore the physical presence and only be digital, or you cannot say as a bank that I'll only go digital and have only a physical presence. So you need to have a balance of both. Now coming on to the digital banks, Saab very,
Mm.
very rightly pointed out. So those wallets or digital accounts, they'll be of course funded through digital means. You may be able to deposit money or fund transfer from any other bank for that matter. If somebody has to pay you, he doesn't have to pay you in cash. So the funds will be transferred online into your digital account. Likewise, if you want to deposit cash for that matter, so there could be once again there could be potential collaboration that they go to any collaborating bank and deposit money on the counter and that's credited into your digital wallet. So because cash is not
Mm.
going anywhere right now. Cash is, I wouldn't say cash is the common enemy, but cash is still pretty much the big thing over here, and cash is still the king.
Oh,
So we
yes.
cannot ignore cash. So digital banks or the digital accounts will facilitate transactions in terms of convenience. But of course, there
Mm-hmm.
has to be a model which needs to supplement or allow you to be able to address both your needs, which is cash and non-cash.
Okay, great. I mean, tell us that we have been talking about all this experiences the customer needs to do lending, and this is and all this journey of a customer from onboarding to payment to deposit and to payings and everything. So, I mean, how important is it for banks to create an omni customer journey and experience? How are banks implementing it? Because if your the
Yeah.
journey is not correct, that there's a gaps, and so you're losing customers, or the customer gets upset, or the whole experience needs to be developed, and because that's the new way and the trend going on. So how are banks implementing it?
First of all, let's define the omni-channel experience because it's one of the buzzwords which we used to be hearing for the past 5 years, but now we are living it. So for the
Yes.
audience out there, what we mean by omni-channel experience is that if I'm offering something on my mobile app, this is just an example. If I'm offering
Mhm.
10 services on my mobile app, those same 10 services should be available on my branch counter. There should be same
Mhm.
10 services should be available on over the call center. Those same 10 services should be available to me on SMS banking or WhatsApp banking. So traditionally,
Yes.
what has happened is that, for example, which is also okay because when you're in that growth phase, so you're concentrating on one particular channel. So over the past number of years, the recent years, there's been a great growth in the mobile apps. So mobile app have got maybe a great number of use cases. There could be 20 services on the mobile app. But when I go to the branch, so the branch possibly will take either much longer to do the same things or they don't have that service or the call center might not be able to give me that same service. I'll give an example. If I need an account maintenance certificate, so I might be able to download it through the mobile app. But if I ask the call center, he'll tell me to walk into the branch. That this is that disjointed experience which has historically been there. But now banks realize that all of your channels they need to offer the same services. So omni-channel means that all your channels, you're representing them, the experience has to be uniform. So I'll give you a personal example that what we're doing at Festival Bank that in the meantime that we are in the process of upgrading our mobile app in 2023, we have been in the intensive phase of coming up with a new app which should be there in the next couple of months. So what we realized was that we should not wait. We cannot tell the customer that we cannot up the game in the mobile app just because we're upgrading the platform. So the
Mhm.
alternate that we created was WhatsApp banking. So today, an interesting fact, Nomina, today in WhatsApp banking at Festival Bank, you can transfer funds as well. You can
Okay.
make bill payments as well. You can
Yes.
talk to an agent through a live chat. So the whole purpose and concept is that there have been two things. You as a product creator and part of the technology industry, you understand that historically what has happened
Yes.
in most of the sectors that we as product developers, we create a product and then tell the customer that I've created a product, now you have to download it or subscribe to it or buy it. But what we
Yes.
don't realize is that what is it that the customer wants, or which platform is the customer more comfortable with. So this is what we realized
Yes.
in the last year that just closed in 2023. We realized that although we are moving towards a new mobile app because that's the demand of the time, but at the same time,
Yes.
most of our customers, in fact, 100% of our customers, everybody's got a WhatsApp. So instead of me
Yes.
making so instead of me making a new mobile app and then telling my customers, okay, now you download this. So what we did was we know that all the customers are on WhatsApp, so we pushed all the services on WhatsApp banking. So this is part of
Okay.
that omni-channel
Awesome.
experience. Yeah, so this is part of that omni-channel strategy that you have to realize what is it that your customer is more comfortable with.
Okay. Acha, I got a question from someone. He says, could you ask Amin if he thinks that there is a pressure on traditional banks to improve customer service, and if there is, does he see any trends of improvement in the industry?
Beautiful question. Because in the next 3 to 5 years, I think entities, I wouldn't just say banks, and especially let's say if you're talking about the financial sectors, those banks who do not up their game in terms of the service, they will be left far behind. Because the competition is increasing not just from the digital banks, but also from let's say the digital wallets, EMIs, etc. So if in the olden days, like I mentioned earlier, maybe 20, 30 years ago, you used to choose a branch either if it was bank because it was closer to your home or to your office. And even if the service was poor, you might say, okay, I'll still stick with it because it's closer, more convenient. But right now, the mobility is so much easier that at the drop of a hat, you can change your bank. You can change
Yeah.
your bank because you can open up a digital account. Or there are so many branches, you can open up and walk into any branch. It will be much faster, or you don't have to even walk into a branch, like I mentioned. So if the service delivery, coming back to the question, the only distinction in terms of an A-rated bank versus any other bank will be the service. So service orientation will make sure that you survive. If you're able to create that world-class service or the best-in-class service, only then it will
Mm.
ensure your continuity as a big player. Otherwise, it's a question mark for those who are unable to deliver or come up to the expectations. That's an important question.
So, by the way, I just got to know this question was shared by us by Shahid Mustafa Saab. He is the ex-CEO of the Telen, I think so, one of the microfinance bank. Let's move to our further question on onboarding. So, how are banks leveraging and enforcing the digital channels like website, ATM, mobile apps, social media, etc., for onboarding new customers, new experience, and ROIs in coming years? We spoke about WhatsApp, which is like the onboarding, but I think so. It's again when we're talking about Omni, it's not just only WhatsApp, which is the most used
True.
channel nowadays. But people do go on visit website. They do go on. You have like now onboarding forms,
Yeah.
ATMs, mobile apps, and everything, and social media definitely as well. So, what is your new onboarding new customers, user experience, and ROIs in coming years in these areas? Are you looking into it?
So I'll mix this question with the previous question as well in terms of the customer servicing part of it.
Sure.
That we always used to hear that if there's one good customer experience, he'll tell another person. But if there's a bad
Mhm.
experience, he'll tell 10 people. But nowadays, in this social media age, so that one customer that he can reach out to 1,000 people on the social media. Only one
Social
post has to
media.
go up on Facebook, on LinkedIn, etc. So at least what we've done with Faisal Bank is that it's very interesting to know that now we've got a specific or a special social media team. So that social media
Hmm.
team, their job is to engage with customers on the social media channels, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So we got social
Hmm.
listening tools. So wherever there's mention of Faisal Bank, whether good or bad, so it pops up with them. So of course, if there's a
Yes.
customer who's disgruntled, if he's got any service issue and he's let's say unable to connect with the call center, or if he's got an issue with the branch, etc., and he's complaining over the social media, so
Hmm.
before that thing even goes viral, our effort moves towards that the social media agents connect with that customer online, and they're able to address
Hmm.
them in real time basis. So what that does is
Hmm.
that before the negativity goes out, so we convert that negative experience into a positive experience, because as soon as the resolution is achieved, so the same customer goes online again and says, "Okay, wow, thank you that you picked it up automatically over the social media, and you were able to
Hmm.
resolve my complaint." So you can
Hmm.
change or convert that negative experience into a wow factor by being close or being able to be in agile in terms of connecting with the customers. Social media, you're absolutely right, Nomina, will play an even important role in the coming years, because you see the platforms are
Yes.
increasing. Now for you and me, or for any entity, the question is, should we be there on TikTok? Should we be there on Snapchat? Should we be
Yes.
there on the platform? Because the customers of tomorrow, they are not on emails anymore. They are on these channels. So it is imperative that you have to be on the channels that your customers are preferring, which I mentioned earlier.
Hmm. So, I mean, nowadays AI is also, this is a little, we'll go small on this AI thing. So, how banks are implementing AI nowadays in their digitalization, or in which areas do you think so banks are implementing, and how far they are looking into going into future?
So AI is potentially the next big thing, because when we talk about AI, what does it actually mean? It actually means that
Mm-hmm.
that bot or that program is able to understand you without any human intervention. I'm explaining it in layman
Yes.
terms. So, for example,
Yes.
if there's a chat service, so right now the chat service which I mentioned earlier to you. So right now I've got
Mm-hmm.
20 agents. I've got 20 agents sitting behind the screens who are connecting with you on live chat, because you put up a
Wow.
question and they respond to you. So what the AI
Mm-hmm.
chatbot does is that, based on the hundreds and thousands of questions over the past 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, that entire inventory of questions, it's predictive. So if Nomina is saying,
Mm-hmm.
okay, hello, Faisal Bank, can you tell me about your Noor card, which is the credit card, Noor credit card. So
Mm-hmm.
automatically that AI bot knows what sort of responses should I be putting it across. It'll
Mm-hmm.
automatically pick up from the repository and tell you, okay, so this is the list of cards that we have, and this is your income range. This is the card that you're eligible for, and these are the discounts which are available, etc. So the whole AI perspective is that you're reducing your cost in terms of the human interface. You're reallocating that human resource into something more productive. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
X number of years down the road, maybe we might reduce our call center agents and relocate them. Let's say in the branch, I'm giving an example, and the call center could be based on the virtual assistants. There could be an AI-based virtual assistant which could be picking up the calls and responding to you. So this the future of AI is immense in terms of not just service efficiency, but also because
Yes.
that AI bot will never be angry at you, even if you
I
even
think
if
so
you
the IT companies are now all the way, we are all around AIs and trying to see that how we can bring in products or services and, around it so we can get all inclusive or even include companies or our customers into it. Anyway, we have a last question before we end. We have a question from an attendee, but before we go to the last question, this question is being shared by Shiraz Saqib. He's a client service manager at Standard Chartered Bank.
Mhm.
How banks are focusing on digitization, since there are still lots of manual documentation involved, which result delay in releasing shipment. Can we have automated LCs? When it comes to manual documentation, I say that it's not only trade digitization. I think that it's many other digitization. Even opening an account is a manual documentation, and even applying for a loan. So, how do you foresee this, please?
I'll sum it up in a mixture of questions. It's an excellent question by Shiraz, because trade, or let's say the traditional business part, has been ignored largely by the digitalization, because right now that digital wave has been more on the front end for the retail or the individual customers. The business
Mm-hmm.
digitalization, sadly, unfortunately, at the transactional banking level or the corporate banking level, hasn't been at that same pace. So yes, I think it's a huge area where so much can be done in terms of optimizing the experience by creating efficiencies and reducing those stacks of paperwork for opening those LCs or retiring those LCs or those trade
Yes.
documentation, etc. So I think we should definitely, that's one area of focus for the entire industry put together. That I wouldn't say just digitization, but automation on that process. So we need to reduce the
True.
paper workload for those people sitting in the back offices. And like you mentioned earlier, that not just trade as well, but even the paper-based account opening processes. Most of the banks, there are a lot of banks which have actually moved away. And over the past 1 year in 2023, even we have moved ahead with the pilot program of a paperless account opening. So now the designated branches that you come across into Festival Bank, those few pilot
Mm,
branches, now there's a paperless onboarding. So you don't have to sign any documents. You don't have to come with stacks of documents. So there's a person
mhm.
sitting with a tab on the computer screen, just like if you go to Nadra or if you go to for your passport renewal, you don't have to fill 10, 20 pages of forms anymore. So the past some years, they've
Yes.
also automated that process. So the similar process of the concept is what we are following, and a number of banks, I'm sure, they're also following the same footsteps. And it's that
So is this
eco-friendly, go
footstep
green.
is yeah. So
Yeah.
these footsteps are falling on the products and services side as well. Because I know the account opening form is one thing which has been implemented and has been asked by SBP to do it, right? But what about like when it comes to lending and in terms of trade and auto financing or SME financing? So
Yeah.
where are we heading towards on those areas?
Yeah. So the sad part
Because
has
that's
been that, you're right. If you are a customer of a bank and you already have an account, but if you want a credit card, you still have to apply with a form. If you want an auto loan, you still have to fill up the form. If you want a home loan, still you have to
yes.
fill up the form. So that redundancy that has to be done away with. And I
Oh yes.
foresee that in the next 2 years there will be a wave of change that even the consumer lending or these application processes, they'll all be digitized or become paperless. Because firstly, it's being environmentally responsible. So nowadays there's this ESG agenda anyways, the environmental
Mm,
social governance agenda, which is a global agenda, and then you have to be more environmentally responsible as well, and also in terms of the
mm,
experience. So like I mentioned, if I am an existing customer, why do I need to resubmit all those papers? So this
yes.
is an archaic model. This is a dinosaur era process which needs to be done away with.
Oh, yes, definitely. So my last question, we are already, I think, so more or less done with the time we have with you. What do you envision as the future of digital banking in Pakistan in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, we have spoke a bit about it, but if you can give a complete holistic picture or some kind of a more insight on this, that would be nice.
I'll just sum it up very briefly, Romana, because I mean, 5 years is way
Please.
too long because technology is moving very fast. So I'll say in the next two to
Yes.
three years, so at least in Pakistan, I'm talking about the Pakistani context, our territory and geography, the brick and
Mm,
click or the phygital strategy will remain to be prime. I'm talking about banks because you need to
mm,
ensure that you still have a physical presence and you have a digital presence as well. So there cannot be a
mm,
digital only presence. You cannot have a physical only presence. So like Shiraz, are one of our audience members, he had mentioned the trade and all. So trade still requires
yeah.
physical presence, right? The businesses still need to come in for those LCs, for those trade documentation, etc., and amongst other things as well. So it's not just one
Mm,
sector or one segment. At times, we normally, we forget the fact that we normally talk about the retail customers, or we just tend to think about you and me as individual customers. But there's a huge number of other segments as well: the retail, the SME, the agriculture segment, etc. So they need a physical presence. So the strategy for the next 2 to 3 years, or the digital strategy, would be creating convenience in the traditional processes, making them faster, more easier, more hassle-free, and at the same time,
mm,
the new audience which is coming up, the Gen Zs, etc. You have to have a separate product line for them as well. So the next three
mm.
years will be more interesting because it will be a blend of both. So you have to address the entire audience without ignoring a particular segment.
Right. That's true. I agree, understand very well, and I think so. I hope this conversation was good, and so I just want to thank you, and thank you for sharing your valuable insight. I think our time is over for this whole episode, and I mean, I really appreciate you taking out time for us. We look forward to a more inclusive and advanced financial landscape of Pakistan. And please stay tuned for our next webinar. We look forward to seeing you all. Thank you again. I mean, your insight was great, and I hope we all have learned out of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramina. Thank you for having me over. All the best to you and the team. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.